We can add empty to-dos to a node, but we cannot see them in the UI or edit them. Let's create a list view of editable to-do tiles. Hello, welcome to Todo, where we are getting prepared for real app development so that you will get freelance clients or a job and be confident about the apps you build. So subscribe and hit the bell to join us on our quest for becoming in-demand Flutter developers. So here we have an app which is already finished, the one which is just which has just been prepared for this tutorial series beforehand, and this is what we are about to build in this episode. A list of to-do tasks, as you can see here, which are for now not going to be reorderable. I have disabled the reorderability even for the finished app for now, so that you can see exactly what we are about to build. And of course you can edit them and add new to-dos as usual. New to-do, right? Something like this. Save it and everything will be saved and updated on the backend too. And of course you can delete the to-dos. Cool. Reorderability will of course be added, but that's something for probably the next part of this series. So where do we begin? Well, of course, just like we have a body field and the color field and the add to do tile in the node form page, right here. You can see the location in the breadcrumbs actually, if you are interested, for the folder and file location. So just like we have this here in the single child scroll view, we also need to have another widget for the to-do list inside of this particular single child scroll view. Now this widget will again live inside of its own file to not clog up the node form page file. So let's create such a file right now. Under widgets, right click, new file. It's gonna be called to-do list widget.dart, and let's immediately create a to-do list widget, which is going to be a stateless widget. Stateless widget to-do list, just like that. Let's import material.dart, and for now let's make it return an empty container. We are now going to add this to-do list widget or instantiate it right above the add to do tile inside of the node form page single child scroll view. So again, const to do list. And here it is. You currently cannot see anything because it's just an empty container. Even before continuing with building the UI for the actual list view and the to do tiles, which are going to be editable, let's focus on showing the snag bars, which are going to notify the user that they are over they are at the limit of maximally 3 to-dos per a list, just like in the finished app, right? Whenever we, actually now we are in the finished app, whenever we add 3 to-dos, we see this snag bar at the bottom. Now, we could either put this functionality of showing this snag bar to the add to do tile, because here we also have a listener, right? Block listener, or we can also add it to a to do list widget. It doesn't really matter where this functionality of showing a snag bar is going to be located. But let's say that we are going to put this into the to-do list, right? Because of that, we're going to return a block listener, and the listener function will be a full body function, not just a single expression one. And then let's again just create a child for now, a simple container like this, so that this code is actually not throwing any errors on us. And what do we want to do inside of this listener? Well, we do want to show a snag bar, in our case a Flashbar, because that's the package we are using. So let's go back to the app we are currently building. whenever a list is full. And since we have everything validated and we have a list of maximally 3 items, we know that we can rely on our domain layer to tell us whenever the list is full. We do not need to add any custom logic to the presentation layer over here. Everything is handled inside of the domain layer. So let's actually check it out. Inside domain nodes, we have value objects, right? And here we have list 3, just like this. In order to show the snag bar whenever there are exactly 3 items present inside of the list, we are not going to rely on the value failure, but instead we are going to rely on the isFullGetter property. That's because we want to display the snag bar whenever there are 3 items. And if we were to wait for the failure to be present inside of the value object, that would mean that there are already at least 4 items present inside of the ListView. So that's one point of why we cannot just use the left side of the either, the value failure in this case. And also if we were to use the value failure, we would lose the actual list of to-dos, because as you know, you can only have either left or right present. As soon as you have the left present here, the right value is discarded. We don't want to do that. So that's why we are going to utilize the isFullGetter and not the failure. So inside of this listener, which is by the way going to listen to a node form block and node form state, we're going to say that if state nodes todos is full, we are then going to use the Flashbar Helper, and we want to create action. These are just some really helper functions to create a nice looking snag bars without much hassle on our side. And its message is for now just going to be again hard-coded, as we have gotten used to in this series. A hard-coded wants longer lists, activate premium. And we're going to add some starry-eyed thingy over here, emoji. By the way, you can get this code as always from the link in the video description. And the button will be simply a flat button saying, or not saying, but having a child, of course, of a text, which is going to say buy now in all caps. And it's absolutely not going to do anything useful, but it's just going to look pretty. And let's say that the text should be white. So style of this text will be text style, colors, and it will be colors yellow. Oh, color yellow. All right, what's happening now? Of course, we do want to have a unpressed handler also. And let's not do absolutely anything in here. We're just faking the functionality for now. It would probably, of course, take you to the buy page for the premium account for your app. And let's say that the duration of the flashbar itself will be seconds 5. And lastly, let's show the snag bar, right? So now what's happening is something that we actually don't want, because this listener will be triggered on every single state change of the node form block, which is of course not something we want. We want to trigger this snag bar or flash bar only when the to-do list is actually full, right? So therefore we need to create a condition listen when on the previous and current state, And what should the condition say? When do we want to display the snag bar? Well, when the current states note todos that is full is true, right? Since this is a Boolean, we do not really need to write any more conditions, but it's basically the same thing as this. So is this going to be enough for what we are trying to accomplish? Well, if we add todos to a brand new task, it is indeed going to be enough, this kind of a condition. So 1, 2, 3, boom, we have a snag bar, right? But when it's not going to be enough is the case when, let's say that this task right over here, we add another to do, we sort of save it, which we cannot do unfortunately, but you also see why this condition is just simply not enough, because we are trying to save the node and we are just getting these snag bars which are about wanting longer to-do lists. But if you think about it, something's not right here. So why are we getting these snag bars repeatedly about longer lists when we are saving this node to which we have added an empty to-do? Well, if you remember, the to-do has a value object called to-do name. And this value object cannot be empty. Right here we have a validator for it. And since we have just added a to-do to this node, you of course cannot see it because the visibility of it is not yet implemented in the UI, but nevertheless it's here and it's empty. Therefore, if we want to save the node, we cannot save it because there is an error present inside of the node entity, right? This error, a to-do name is empty. And now why is this want longer lists message appearing over and over again? That's because we are updating the node form state with is saving is true, and then the to-do name has a value failure. So the state changes, but it changes in a way which should not show the want longer lists snag bar. So how can we prevent it from showing on such unrelated state changes in the node form block? Well, of course, we need to expand this condition, right? We cannot just use the value of the current state, but we also have to use the value of the previous state. And therefore, if the previous state is full and the current state is still full, which is the case in this case when the state changes like this, when we have really in fact some kind of a different error, but it shows this unrelated snag bar, well, the snag bar is not going to get shown, right? So we need to have a condition saying that if the P node to-dos is full, the previous state's to-do list is full, is not equal to the current state is full. So if there has been some change in between the state updates of this is full value, only then do we want to show a snag bar. And so now if I press this save button, nothing will be shown. But if I add another to-do and the list gets full, the snag bar will indeed be shown. Great. And now, what about creating the actual UI for the to-do tasks so that we can actually see them on the screen? Well, that's something we are going to tackle right now. So the child of the blog listener is not just going to be some sort of a container. Instead, it's going to be a consumer of form to-dos which we have created in the previous part, form todos, just holds values of the to-do item primitives. If you don't know what I'm talking about, just rewatch the previous part where I have explained it in a huge extent. And this consumer comes from the provider package, so let's import it. And basically the consumer widget has a builder which is going to get rebuilt whenever there is a to-do added or removed or however else updated inside of the form to-dos, which is just a KT list, immutable list of to-do item primitives. So we want to have a function here, context form to-dos is the value we're operating with, and then a child, which we don't even really need, and a builder needs to return a widget, how else, which is going to be a ListView builder. The item builder of our ListView will build widgets we are going to create in just a bit. For now, let's just return containers. And the item count will be gotten from the form to-dos, to-do item primitives, then its value, which is the actual list of to-do item primitives, because remember that form to-dos is just a value notifier, right? Just like this. So we need to get its value to get to the actual value, which is the KT list. And we want to get the size of the list. So in other words, its length. And what is the widget that we want to show inside of this ListView? Well, we are going to create it right inside of this file to keep it sort of like cohesive. And it's going to be a widget called to-do tile, and it's going to be a hook widget from Flutter Hooks package, which we are using, but we are going to create it as a stateless widget, to-do tile, and then immediately change its type to be, or its super type to be a hook widget, which again is something like a stateful widget, only a lot simpler to deal with, and especially a lot more, you can write a lot shorter code when you use hook widgets as opposed to stateful widgets. Now, we do need to somehow tell this to-do tile widget which exact to-do item primitive it should display inside of it. You may think that we may want to pass in a to-do item primitive itself, just like this item, and put it into the constructor. But because we also want to edit the individual to-do items inside of the node form, for this reason, we need to have its index also. And since we need to pass the index, final int index, into this to-do tile, then it's also absolutely simple to just retrieve the individual to-do item primitives from the value notifier form to-dos according to their index. So that's why we are actually going to not have any to-do item primitives fields or parameters in the constructor directly inside the to-do tile, because they are kind of redundant when you have the index anyway. So let's add the index here. We are going to actually create it as a required parameter, which is going to be also named. All right, let's format everything properly. And therefore now we can, from this ListView, return a to-do tile instead of the container. To-do tile, and its index will be index, just like this. So now we can hop into changing the UI of the actual to-do tile. So let's start off with the bread and butter of the to-do tile, which is going to be, of course, a list tile. So let's return list tile, boom, and leading. So whatever is, when you're using right or left to right layout, that will be on the left side, leading. This is going to be a checkbox. And for now, let's just hard code a value. So unchanged will not do anything for now, at least from the beginning. Value, let's just say true, so that we can actually see something on the screen. And we couldn't see anything on the screen, so I just went back, I navigated back to the previous page. And now actually, when we try to go into some sort of a node form page, we cannot see absolutely anything. So what's happening here? Why cannot we see any to-do tiles with the checked checkboxes, and we cannot see actually absolutely nothing? So what's going on? Well, the culprit is exactly this list view of to-do tiles, because currently, if we take a look at the debug console, we see a bunch of errors. If we scroll all the way up to the first one, which is usually the most descriptive one, it says that a vertical viewport was given unbounded height. What's going on? Well, it's all about this list view, because list views, they have unbounded height by default in their scroll direction. So since this is a vertical list view, it is unbounded vertically. And this causes errors, of course. If for nothing else, that's because we are inside of a single child scroll view, right? Because single child scroll view holds a to-do list, and our to-do list holds this list view. So we have two scroll views inside one another, and it's unbounded, and it's just a mess. That's why we need to say shrink wrap that it will be true. And what shrink wrap does is, whoops, after we possibly hot restart, right? Let's see, sure enough, what shrink wrap does is that the list view will actually calculate its vertical size in this case based on its children. Now, of course, it's an expensive operation. There are other ways to build this kind of a layout. For example, with slivers, it's also possible. But the reason why we are going with this, let's say, not very much optimized way of putting one scrollable thing, one list view into another scroll view, the reason for this is that we want to have it reorderable at some point, hopefully in the next episode. And by using just a regular list view with widgets instead of using a bunch of slivers all over the place, it's just much easier to get this thing reorderable. Because if we were to go with the slivers, this series would be even longer than it is now, because it's actually, we would need to write a lot of code ourselves, but this way we can utilize some packages which do the thing for us. So that's why we opted in for this kind of a shrink wrapped list view. It's not going to destroy the performance, because I mean, the to-dos are never going to hold 20,000 to-dos. So if you have just short list views, it's completely fine to use shrink wrap and to use nested scroll views. But if you have long lists and you do something like this with shrink wrap, you are going to probably run into trouble on the performance side. So let's continue. Of course, this checkbox is not just going to always hold the value of true, and its unchanged handler should actually update the state inside of the node form block. So where are we actually going to get the value of whether it's checked or not for the checkbox? Well, we need to get hold of the to-do item primitive, which this to-do tile represents. Now we do have this index integer inside of the to-do tile as a field, so we are going to use it to grab the proper to-do item primitive from our form to-dos value notifier. So final to-do is going to be equal to context dot to-dos. We do want to use our extension, which we have created in the previous part. So let's just go into the add to-do tile widget.dart file right here, and let's grab the import for the extension build context X. So let's just grab it from down there. And again, you can also get this code from the link in the video description. And now we can access the to-dos, or actually form to-dos, once we have that import up top. And then this form to-dos is a KT list of to-do item primitive. Now we could just say get, just like with a regular list, we would provide an index, right? And this would grant us a to-do item primitive, right? But just to be even more safe, what is going to happen in this case if the index is out of bounds, right? Well, we are going to get an error. But instead of getting an error, if we pass in an index out of bounds, what we want to do instead is to play it safe here and just return an empty to-do item primitive. So we are going to say get or else, and this is actually present on the KT library. So we need to import it. So let's say KT list, just to import the kt.dart, and now we can actually use the get or else getter. We are gonna pass in the index which we want to get, and if this index is out of bounds, we're gonna say that we wanna just return a to-do item primitive which is empty. Now we can use this to-do item primitive to populate the value of the checkbox. So it's going to say to-do.done. The checkboxes don't change because the to-dos are done anyway, but yeah, if we add a new to-do, it's not going to be done, so it's going to be an unchecked checkbox. Now we need to handle the changes so that they are actually reflected in the state of the node form block. At first, we want to modify the primitives, just like with a text form field, let's say, which operates on a primitive string, and only then we take that string and put it into our application layer to the block to update the state of the block. In the same way, with our custom to-do item primitives, we want to first update those primitives and only then take them and put them to the block to update the state of the block in the application layer. So we want to update the form to-dos. So we're going to say context.form to-dos is equal to, and form to-dos, of course, is nothing else than provider of form to-dos dot value. So we are updating the value of our form to-dos value notifier by this. And we need to update these form to-dos to have a changed value of the done variable for the to-do, which we are currently editing inside of this to-do tile. Now, this may sound confusing, and the code may actually even look confusing, but once we write it, and I will guide you through it again, I'm certain that you are going to understand what's actually going on. This kind of a mess which we are about to create, it's not really a mess, it's just something that you get if you, as I say, try to over-secure your application, as we are doing here, by having value objects all over the place. And Of course, with that comes a bit of more complexity, and that's why I recommend that you actually do not use value objects, but use everything else from this series. The value objects are really a cherry on top. They are nice because everything is validated, but at the same time, you've got to have some trade-offs. And for most of the apps out there, having this kind of a security of not even having a possibility to have corrupt data inside of your fields, that's just a bit too much for the complexity it adds. The value offer is not enough in order to rationalize the complexity which it adds into the app. But anyway, let's go. So we want to set the to-dos to be context.formTodos, and we need to map the form to-dos, which is of course just a KT list of to-do item primitives. And why are we mapping them? Why are we mapping this list? Well, that's because we want to update only one of the list to-dos, of the to-do item primitives. And the one we want to update from this unchanged function is, of course, the one which represents this to-do tile. So we want to update only the list to-do, which is equal to the to-do of the to-do tile. So list to-do is equal to to-do. And if it is, only then we want to update the done value of the to-do to be the value coming from the checkbox, right? In other case, we want the list to-do to be returned unchanged, like this. And again, this may look like a complete mess, but what are we doing here? The first part is simple. We are just using the setter, so we are setting the form to-dos to have a new value. Now, this part is what's interesting. That's because we cannot just simply pick a single form to-do and update a single form to-do inside of the KT list. That's because KT list is immutable and you need to update it as a whole. You cannot just update a single index inside of a KT list. That's just impossible because of its immutability. This is a good thing, but as you can see, it can also add a bit of a boilerplate, but that's not really an issue once you understand what's going on. Now we are mapping through all of the to-dos present inside of the KT list. All of the to-dos, not just the one we are currently editing. So this mapping will grant us all of the to-dos. And because it grants us all of the to-dos in the list view, or in the list therefore, and we want to edit only the one associated with this to-do tile which the user has touched, we need to have a comparison here saying that only for the list to-do, which is equal to this to-do tiles to-do, do we want to update the value of whether it's done or not. Otherwise, if the to-do through which we are iterating by the virtue of this map function, if it's not equal to the to-do which is representing this to-do tile, then we are just going to return the list to-do item primitive unchanged. We're not going to touch its done value. As always, you can get this code from the link in the video description and go over it at your own pace. And now once we have this, it's all pretty simple from here. So we just want to get a context again, access a block on it. It's going to be of type node form block, right? And we just want to add an event, which is going to be a event form event. To-dos changed, and this accepts a kt list of to-do item primitives. And of course, we have just previously updated the to-do item primitives, which are present inside context.form-todos. And just like this, we are successfully updating the to-do item primitives and then the validated to-dos inside of the node form block. So if I close this screen, come back, and I untick the second to-do, which as you can see should be hey, as you can see on the screen. So I untick hey, that it's not done, and I save it, it should be updated if it actually wants to save something. This is interesting what's going on. Okay, so we have this beautiful thing happening, some sort of an error. And for the last 5 minutes or so, I've been trying to understand what's going on, because when I open the debug console, of course, we see something along the lines of the error which is actually happening on top is instance of to-do item DTO occurred in instance of node form block. Like totally helpful, totally I can understand what's going on, right? From this kind of vague message. It doesn't even make sense, right? So to-do item DTO in instance of node form block, right? So I went to node form block, and since this error happens whenever we start to save the node as a whole, I checked out this code, no errors, but the error of course happens here on updating the node repository. Then the execution doesn't go any further if you put your breakpoints below. So this is the culprit. So I hit Control to F12 or Command F12, I believe, on Mac to go to the implementation of this interface method. And we're here, right? So there is something bad going on with the node DTO, or to be more exact, with the to-do item DTO. And immediately something popped into my mind, which I want to show you so that you know what's actually going on whenever you encounter this kind of an error message. If you are using the JSON serializable package inside of Flutter. So what's actually going on is that the execution of the code stops here. This is where the exception happens and everything goes south from here. So what we need to do is to inspect the JSON output of when we put our whole node DTO to JSON, because of course Firebase update method can only operate with JSON, with map string dynamic. It doesn't understand anything else. But the culprit here is that when we put JSON here into a separate variable so that we can inspect it, and then try to put JSON into Firestore like this, put a breakpoint here on this line, hard restart, come back, save. What's happening here is that the JSON, it does hold, hopefully you can see it on YouTube too, it is a map of 4 items, but the problem is that the to-do list still holds to-do item DTOs. So while the, let's say, outer node, this got converted to JSON, to a map of list of string dynamic successfully, the inside did not get fully successfully converted because the to-dos, the to-do item DTOs, are still DTOs. They are not maps. And if you think about it, this is pretty interesting, right? Because as far as we all know, JSON serializable, which the Freest package is using behind the scenes, right? It should just simply take the children of NodeDTO, and if they also are serializable by the JSON serializable package, it should simply convert them to JSON too without any issues, right? In other words, the JSON serializable package should not have problems with nested objects. This is true, but it's also true that you need to tell it not to have problems with nested objects. And how can you do that? Well, you need to edit one very special file, which is going to be placed into the directory where pubspec.yaml lives. That is the root of the project. So let's create a new file, and it's going to be called build.yaml. And inside of this file, you are going to place the following. I could also write that out manually. You can write it out manually if you want to, but as always, you can also get the code from the link in the video description. So this contraption right here, what this does is that it sets the JSON serializables explicit to JSON to true. And what this is going to allow us to do, or the package is going to be allowed to do, is that any nested object, which is JSON serializable itself, is going to get also converted to JSON successfully. And if we apply this to our node DTO, this means that the list of to-do item DTOs will now be a list of a map string dynamic. All right, so let's save this build.yaml. Now, we probably need to completely rerun the app, I would guess. So I'm gonna stop its execution and just run it again. And now we should be good to go. I'm actually confident enough that I'm going to close all of the files which I have opened just now. So node repository, all of that. And let's come back to our to-do list widgets and our to-do tile. So once this is going to be run, and it's already being run, let's come here. Let's untick the last to-do. Let's save it now. Of course, the breakpoint is triggered, but let's hope for the best right now. And it's now working still. And I know why, but this time I'm actually not going to waste your time with that while the command is running, because actually we need to rerun the build runner, of course. Because JSON serializable package, which is responsible for the to JSON conversion, its code is generated by the build runner, and it needs to be regenerated to reflect the change we have made inside of the build.yaml. That's something I didn't realize right off the bat, but once this is done, everything is going to work properly. So let's try it again. Untick the last to do, save it. And it works. So we have proven once again that whenever something goes wrong with your app, blame the build runner, and of course blame yourself too, but blame the build runner. Usually with these kinds of issues, the issue is always with the build runner. Either some sort of a dependency is not working correctly and you need to override the analyzer dependency usually, or something like this happens, you have something badly configured and stuff. But you would not believe how many times I've been burned by the build runner already. But now we have fixed that. Hopefully it will help you on your journey with the build runner, because I think that if you are using it, you are just going to have many problems with it down the line at some point. Let's revert back the changes we have made, or I have made, to the repository code, because we've made it just for debugging purposes. And here we go. So actually, this is a wrap for this part, because it has been going on for quite a long time. I thought that it's going to take a bit less time, and also I didn't expect these kinds of errors. So that's why we are going to fully implement the to-do tiles in the next part. So we are going to add the text editing or text form field for the name of the to-do. And we are also going to style the to-dos nicely and also do error handling for the to-dos. And only then we are going to make this list reorderable. So if you do not want to miss those parts, be sure to subscribe to this channel and also join Notification Squad by hitting the bell button to make sure you grow your Flutter skills, because here on ResoCoder, I am determined to provide you with the best tutorials and resources so that you will become an in-demand Flutter developer. And if you are serious about becoming a great Flutter developer who can build real apps for clients or at the job, go to flutter.education, link is also in the video description by the way, to get the top curated Flutter news and resources aimed at improving your app development career. Over there you can also subscribe to my mailing list to get the best Flutter resources delivered weekly right into your inbox. If this video helped you also with understanding the errors by or caused by BuildRunner and its associated files, give this video a like and also share it with other developers who are surely going to find this beneficial too. Leave a comment if you have anything to say, and see you in the next video.